I want to pause here and talk about what this actually does to families. Not in legal terms, in human terms. Patricia is 71 years old. Her husband is gone. She is still living in the house in Kernersville. She gets a Social Security check every month and a small pension from her years as a teacher's assistant. She is not wealthy. She is not poor. She is exactly the kind of person who the American dream was supposed to protect. And now, hanging over her head and over her children's heads, is a six-figure claim from the state of North Carolina that will attach to her home the moment she passes away. Her daughter, who is in her late 40s, working a regular job in Winston-Salem, raising two kids of her own, cannot stop thinking about it. She told me she has nightmares about getting a letter from the state after her mother dies. She said the thing that haunts her most is knowing that her parents worked their entire lives for that house, and the state is just going to take it. The financial impact is real and significant, but the emotional impact, the feeling that the system punishes people for working hard and doing the right things, that is something that stays with families for years. I also want to be honest with you about something. This is not a story about a broken system that needs to be fixed. Medicaid estate recovery exists because long-term care is extraordinarily expensive, and someone has to pay for it. The state of North Carolina is not being predatory. They are recouping costs from estates that have assets available. Assets that in many cases only exist because Medicaid paid for years of care that the family otherwise could not have afforded. The problem is not the policy. The problem is that most families have never heard of it. They find out about it in a hospital conference room or a caseworker's office, at the worst possible moment, when the options for protecting themselves have already narrowed dramatically. That is the gap this channel exists to fill. Not to help wealthy families hide assets from the government, but to make sure that regular working families in Winston-Salem and Greensboro and High Point and Kernersville have the same information that wealthy families with estate planning attorneys have always had. Because right now, the families who know how to protect themselves are the ones who can afford to pay someone to tell them. And the families who get blindsided are the ones who are working too hard to ever think about it until the moment of crisis arrives. So what can you actually do? What are the legitimate legal strategies that North Carolina families can use to protect their home from Medicaid estate recovery? I want to be clear up front that this is an area of law where professional guidance is genuinely important. The stakes are high, the rules are complex, and a mistake can be catastrophically expensive. What I am going to share with you today is educational. It is the framework you need to understand the landscape and have an informed conversation with a qualified elder law attorney. It is not a substitute for personalized legal advice. With that said, here are the strategies that are most relevant for working families in the Piedmont Triad. Strategy 1 is the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, sometimes called an Irrevocable Medicaid Trust or a MAPT. This is one of the most powerful tools available for families who have enough time to use it properly, which means more than 5 years before they anticipate needing long-term care. Here is how it works. You transfer your home and potentially other assets into an irrevocable trust. Irrevocable means you cannot take it back. That is the key distinction from a revocable living trust. Because you have given up control of the asset, it is no longer considered yours for Medicaid purposes after the 5-year look-back period has passed. The state cannot recover it through estate recovery because it no longer legally belongs to your estate. You can continue to live in the home. Many Medicaid asset protection trusts are structured to give the grantor, the person creating the trust, a retained life estate, which means the right to live in the home for the rest of your life. The home is protected from Medicaid recovery, but you are not displaced. The critical limitation is timing. If you set up this trust today and need nursing home care 4 years from now, the transfer is still within the look-back window and will trigger a penalty period. This strategy works best for families in their late 50s or early 60s who are healthy today and planning ahead. Strategy 2 is spousal protection through what is called Community Spouse Resource Allowance. When one spouse enters a nursing home and applies for Medicaid, the other spouse, the community spouse, is not required to impoverish themselves completely. North Carolina follows federal rules that allow the community spouse to keep a certain amount of assets, including potentially the family home, a vehicle, household goods, and a portion of the couple's combined countable assets. The minimum and maximum amounts change periodically based on federal guidelines, but the basic principle is that the state cannot force the at-home spouse into poverty as a condition of the nursing home spouse receiving Medicaid benefits. Understanding exactly what assets are exempt and what limits apply in your specific situation requires working with someone who knows North Carolina Medicaid rules in detail. Strategy 3 involves annuities and promissory notes used in specific circumstances to convert countable assets into income streams in a way that complies with Medicaid rules. This is a sophisticated strategy that has strict requirements and significant potential downsides if done incorrectly. It is not something to attempt without professional guidance. Strategy 4 is enhanced life estate deeds, sometimes called ladybird deeds. In states that recognize them, a ladybird deed allows you to transfer your home to your children at death while retaining full control during your lifetime, and in some cases, avoiding Medicaid estate recovery. However, North Carolina does not officially recognize ladybird deeds the way some other states do, and their effectiveness for Medicaid planning in North Carolina is legally uncertain. This is an area where you absolutely need a North Carolina elder law attorney before proceeding. Strategy 5 is the one that is accessible to nearly every family, regardless of their financial situation, and it costs very little to implement. It is simply purchasing long-term care insurance before you need it. Long-term care insurance pays for nursing home care, assisted living, and in-home care so that you do not have to spend down your assets to qualify for Medicaid in the first place. If you never become dependent on Medicaid for long-term care, Medicaid estate recovery cannot touch your estate. The challenge is that long-term care insurance is most affordable when you are in your 50s and in good health. Once health issues emerge or you reach your late 60s, premiums become expensive or coverage becomes unavailable. This is another area where waiting until the crisis arrives has already eliminated one of your best options. Let me bring this back to Robert and Patricia's daughter. When she called me, it was already too late to protect the full value of the estate from Medicaid recovery. Robert had passed. The claim was filed. The 5-year look-back window had not been used for any planning. They were in crisis mode, not planning mode. But there were still things that could be done. Patricia was still alive and still living in the home. Under North Carolina Medicaid rules, the state cannot force the sale of the home while a surviving spouse is living in it. The claim exists. It will attach to the estate eventually, but Patricia cannot be displaced from her home today. That gave the family time. Not to eliminate the claim, that was no longer possible, but to plan for what happens when Patricia eventually passes or needs her own care. To understand the hardship waiver process that North Carolina makes available in limited circumstances. To explore whether there are any legal avenues to reduce the amount of the recovery claim, and to make sure that Patricia's own estate planning was in order so that whatever assets remained could be distributed as efficiently as possible. It was not the outcome that family deserved, but it was better than where they would have been with no guidance at all. Here is the action plan I want you to take away from this video. Not someday, this week. Step 1. Have an honest conversation with every adult in your immediate family about long-term care. Do not wait for the crisis to start the conversation. Ask each other the hard questions. What would happen if one of you needed nursing home care next year? Do you know what it costs in the Triad? Do you know where the money would come from? Do you know what Medicaid would and would not cover? Step 2. Get a clear picture of where your assets actually stand. Write down every significant asset you own. Your home, your retirement accounts, your savings, any investment accounts, and what is in each one. Note who owns each asset, how it is titled, and who the beneficiaries are. You cannot protect what you have not clearly identified. Step 3. If you or your spouse are in your 50s or early 60s and in reasonably good health, research long-term care insurance options now. Get quotes. Understand what is covered and what is not. Even a modest policy that covers 3 to 5 years of care can be the difference between your estate surviving intact and being consumed by recovery claims. Step 4. If you own a home and you are concerned about Medicaid estate recovery, consult with a North Carolina elder law attorney, not a general practice attorney, not a real estate attorney, but someone who specializes specifically in Medicaid planning and elder law in this state. The rules are specific to North Carolina. The strategies that work in Virginia or South Carolina may not work here. You need someone who knows exactly what you are dealing with. Step 5. If you already have a revocable living trust, which I covered in a previous video on this channel, understand that a standard revocable living trust does not protect your assets from Medicaid estate recovery. In North Carolina, assets in a revocable trust are still considered part of your estate for Medicaid recovery purposes. If Medicaid protection is your goal, you need a different type of trust structure. This is a distinction that trips up many families who think they have already handled their estate planning. Step 6. If you have parents who are in their 70s or 80s, have this conversation with them now, not after the stroke, not after the dementia diagnosis. Now, while there is still time to plan, while they can still participate in the decision-making, while the 5-year clock can still be running in your favor. The hardest part of everything I have just told you is that none of it requires unusual intelligence or extraordinary wealth. It just requires doing it before the crisis arrives. That is the only real variable. The families who protect their homes are not smarter or richer than the families who lose them. They just started the conversation earlier. Robert and Patricia deserved better than what happened to them. They worked hard. They paid off their home. They did the things you are supposed to do. And the system reached into their estate anyway, because nobody had ever sat down with them and explained that this was coming. Do not let that be your family's story. If this video hit home, and I genuinely hope it did, drop a comment right now. Tell me, did you know about Medicaid estate recovery before today? Yes or no? I read every single comment, and the answers to that question help me understand what this community needs most. And if you want to understand how a properly structured trust can protect your Winston-Salem home, not just from probate, but from Medicaid recovery, that video is already on this channel, and it is the next thing you should watch. I will link it at the end of this video. Watch it before the end of this week. This is not about getting rich. It is about protecting what you already built for the people you love. Assets over excuses.